Kash Patel thought his meticulously crafted cover story was completely impenetrable until Senator Chris Coons pressed a single button and methodically dismantled his entire career in front of the watching world. Welcome back to Silent Docket. What you are about to hear is the extraordinary anatomy of a political disaster. It is the story of a digital recording that was never, under any circumstances, supposed to be played inside the solemn, highly secure walls of that specific government room. And then, without any prior warning, someone finally pressed play. Just moments ago, Senator Chris Coons executed a maneuver within the Senate Judiciary Committee that the FBI director's entire, highly paid communications operation had spent 3 agonizing weeks praying no elected official would ever have the nerve to do. He played the unedited tape. He did not offer a sanitized clip from it. He did not hold up a grainy, printed screenshot of it. And he absolutely refused to settle for reading a dry, written description of what the controversial footage actually showed. With the cold precision of a veteran prosecutor, he physically connected his personal laptop to the committee's massive, state-of-the-art audio system, steadily clicked the play button, and allowed the unmistakable, sharp, metallic sound of Kash Patel aggressively cracking open a beer can to completely echo through and fill the cavernous hearing room. This shocking auditory moment occurred at the exact same fraction of a second that the highly recognizable voice of the President of the United States was broadcasting live through a tiny cell phone speaker, echoing from the humid, sweat-drenched confines of a hockey locker room thousands of miles away in Milan, Italy. Every single high-definition broadcast camera positioned within that grand, historic chamber captured the exact same cinematic sequence of events simultaneously. The lenses focused intensely on the massive digital screen, positioned directly behind Senator Coons, which vividly displayed the chaotic, colorful locker room footage as it played out in real time. The cameras captured the stunned, unblinking faces of the veteran senators sitting at the dais, helplessly watching the indisputable footage play before their eyes. And most importantly, the cameras zoomed in on Kash Patel himself. He was sitting entirely motionless at the central wooden witness table, forced to stare at the giant screen, displaying his own image as he casually, almost carelessly, opened a beverage directly beside the active phone speaker. At that precise moment, Donald Trump's voice was clearly saying the congratulatory words that the entire country had already scrutinized online. But the crucial difference today was that this footage had never before been played inside a formal, legally binding congressional hearing, while the subject was under the strict penalty of perjury, with the powerful director of the FBI essentially trapped and required to desperately explain exactly what he was thinking. Director Patel's face, normally a rigid mask of composed, untouchable professionalism, went completely pale in the mere 4 seconds it took for that distinct, pressurized beer can's opening sound to register vividly on the audio tape. The atmosphere in the room shifted from procedural boredom to suffocating tension. His highly experienced lead attorney immediately stood up from his leather chair, an instinctual, sudden movement born of sheer legal panic. Reacting instantly to this sudden disruption, 2 heavily armed Capitol police officers stationed vigilantly at the side walls of the chamber moved one synchronized step forward, preparing to neutralize any potential physical escalation. And yet, through all of this surrounding chaos, Senator Coons remained perfectly, eerily still. He had not raised the volume of his voice by a single decibel. He had not even bothered to stand up from his seated position of authority. He had simply pressed play, sat back with his hands calmly and firmly folded on the polished mahogany table, and patiently waited for the chaotic, overlapping sounds of the locker room video to finally end before delivering just one single, devastating question. Director Coons began, his voice cutting through the heavy, expectant silence like a surgical blade. The FBI explicitly and repeatedly told Congress that this overseas trip was fundamentally official business. He then slowly raised his hand and pointed an unwavering finger directly at the frozen, damning image on the screen behind him. Is that what official business looks like? You need to keep watching this video until the very final second, because what systematically unfolded over the course of the following 9 minutes was, without a doubt, the most complete, inescapable dismantling of a high-ranking government official's public justification that this distinguished committee has witnessed in many years. Coons achieved this not with shouting, but by simply playing the director's own documented behavior right back to him. If you are new to this channel, Please make sure to subscribe right now and turn on all of your notifications because the highly damaging tape that Coons played is now officially entered into the permanent, unalterable congressional record. It absolutely cannot be quietly archived away in some forgotten digital vault. It cannot be mysteriously reclassified to hide it from the probing eyes of the American public. And it most certainly cannot ever be spun or described by any polished FBI spokesperson as long-planned official law enforcement travel ever again. The unvarnished truth is right there, immortalized for history. The cold beer, the loud Toby Keith music, Donald Trump on a speakerphone, and a shiny Olympic gold medal proudly draped around the neck of the highest law enforcement officer in the nation. Let us rewind the timeline to provide you with the full, unfiltered context of how this spectacular disaster originally materialized. The date was February 22nd, 2026. In a heart-stopping, magnificent athletic performance, Team USA had miraculously defeated Canada with a score of 2-to-1-inch sudden death overtime. By doing so, they spectacularly secured the Olympic gold medal for the first time in an astonishing 46 years. The emotional magnitude of the moment was undeniably historic, and absolutely nobody in the political sphere disputes the sheer brilliance of the athletic achievement. However, what was fiercely and immediately disputed from the very second the first celebratory video appeared online was whether the highest-ranking director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation had any legitimate, justifiable business being inside that sweaty, euphoric locker room in the first place. The FBI's massive public relations machine had initially responded with a resounding yes. They aggressively pushed the narrative that the international trip was painstakingly planned months in advance for strictly vital official purposes. They proudly stated that Director Patel had importantly visited the Milan Joint Operations Center and had held crucial, high-level meetings with his esteemed Italian law enforcement counterparts. This polished, carefully focus-grouped official business explanation was forcefully and repeatedly fed to the press corps. And then, the dam broke, and the damning videos started to flood the internet. The very first clip, shockingly obtained and posted by a diligent ProPublica journalist, clearly and undeniably showed Director Patel enthusiastically chugging a beer and aggressively banging on a table right in the dead center of the chaotic Team USA locker room celebration. The second leaked video amplified the scandal, showing the director with a massive Olympic gold medal proudly draped around his neck, physically jumping up and down in unison with the exhausted athletes while the fiercely patriotic country anthem, courtesy of the Red, White and Blue by Toby Keith, blasted deafeningly in the background. But it was the third video that transformed a terrible optical blunder into a full-blown political crisis. This final video showed Patel holding his personal cell phone up to a loudspeaker, acting as an eager facilitator so that President Donald Trump could personally congratulate the victorious hockey team. Through the speaker, Trump loudly praised the American goaltender, calling his performance unbelievable. The president generously invited the entire victorious team to attend his upcoming State of the Union address, and then, inexplicably, decided to make an off-color joke concerning the women's hockey team, a spontaneous remark that most members of the women's squad subsequently and publicly described as highly disrespectful and inappropriate. Crucially, it was precisely during that specific third video, at the exact moment when Trump was speaking loudly and clearly through the amplified speaker, that Patel carelessly reached his arm across the cluttered table, picked up an unopened beer can, and cracked it loudly open right beside the speaker's microphone while the President of the United States was mid-sentence. The disrespect implied by the action was palpable. Unsurprisingly, NBC News subsequently broke the explosive, behind-the-scenes report that President Trump was personally deeply unhappy with Patel's behavior. Sources indicated the president was furious, specifically regarding the embarrassing beer footage, and equally enraged by the director's highly questionable use of a massive, taxpayer-funded government aircraft for what essentially looked like a frat party. Just carefully process that toxic combination of elements: the steadfast official business justification, a luxurious government jet, an exclusive locker room party, a cracked beer, a president echoing on a speakerphone, and that same president reportedly becoming furious about the entire public spectacle. If you are still completely captivated by this incredible breakdown, please hit the like button on this video right now, because what I have just meticulously described to you is absolutely not a partisan characterization or an exaggeration. Every single scandalous element of this unbelievable narrative is permanently documented in high-definition video footage that has already been viewed by tens of millions of astounded people worldwide, And every fact has been rigorously fact-checked and verified by NBC News, CNN, and multiple other major independent media outlets. Drop a comment below and tell me your honest thoughts. When the sitting president's voice comes booming through that speakerphone and the supreme head of the FBI casually reaches out for a cold beer, what is the exact appropriate word you would use to describe that level of arrogant unprofessionalism? Now, let us return to the dramatic, high-stakes arena of the Senate Judiciary Committee. The grueling, intensely confrontational hearing had already been underway for a tense 90 minutes by the time Senator Coons finally secured his turn to interrogate the witness. Throughout the exhausting morning, Patel had stubbornly clung to his talking points, citing the exact official business language no less than 5 separate times in his carefully rehearsed prior responses to other committee members. The repetitive robotic explanation had been running like a dull, monotonous background track until it took on the hollow, meaningless sound of something repeated so many times it had simply become an empty reflex. Then, Chairman Durbin officially recognized Senator Coons. For context, Coons is the deeply respected senior senator, hailing from Delaware. He is a former tough county executive and a brilliant, highly educated attorney who has faithfully and diligently served on this specific, powerful committee for more than a solid decade. He is fundamentally not a politician known to grandstand for the cameras or perform theatrical, empty stunts in serious hearings. When he interrogates, he asks his questions in the highly methodical, surgical, and relentless way of a seasoned prosecutor who has carefully read every single available document, scrutinized every footnote, and knows exactly which sequence of queries will inevitably produce the definitive trap-closing answer that belongs in the permanent record. Methodically, deliberately, Coons opened his laptop on the curved, polished surface of the committee desk. He calmly took a single, standard audio cable and plugged it directly into the committee's complex, room-filling sound system. He looked sharply at Patel for one brief, piercing second, and then turned his gaze respectfully to the chairman. "Senator Coons," Durbin acknowledged softly, yielding the floor. Coons then locked his eyes back onto the FBI director. "Director, I want to play you something," he stated simply, offering no further preamble. He confidently clicked the trackpad. The chaotic, booming sound of the recording immediately came crashing through the hearing room's high-quality speakers at full, unadulterated committee volume. The austere room was instantly filled with the deafening locker room noise, exhausted players wildly screaming and celebrating, a heavy table being rhythmically and violently banged upon, and then Patel's own distinct, undeniable voice becoming completely audible and clearly identifiable, yelling joyously in the background, while the vibrant video footage showed him standing right in the chaotic, joyful center of the room. Next came the visual of the heavy Olympic gold medal being placed around his neck. Then, the infamous phone call starting. Trump's unmistakable voice echoed out of place within the Senate chamber. "Unbelievable. You were all unbelievable." And then, right there, in the undeniable video, clearly visible to every single high-definition news camera in the hearing room, because the massive screen behind Coons was broadcasting the footage as it played, Patel's hand brazenly reached across the empty space in front of him, securely grabbed a colorful beer can, and cracked it open right next to the phone's speaker. The sharp, distinct, metallic sound of the pressurized can opening was shockingly audible over President Trump's continuing voice. The incredibly incriminating footage ran for exactly 41 agonizing seconds. Then, with a definitive, final click, Coons stopped the playback. The massive hearing room was instantly plunged into a completely suffocating, profound silence. Patel was sitting rigidly at the witness table, his eyes locked onto the now blank screen. His facial expression took on the terrified, hollow quality of a desperate man being forced to watch undeniable, high-definition footage of himself in a deeply compromising situation that he simply cannot explain without instantly creating an even worse, potentially career-ending legal situation. He was pale. He was completely, unnaturally still. His highly paid lead attorney had nervously leaped up from his chair at exactly the 2-0-second mark of the footage, which was the precise, damning moment the fateful beer can had visibly appeared on the screen, and the lawyer remained awkwardly standing, unsure of what to do. The two heavily armed officers at the side walls had defensively moved one step forward the instant the attorney stood up, faithfully executing what they were trained to do whenever an agitated individual made any unexpected physical movement inside a secure hearing room. Neither of the officers spoke a single word. The entire room collectively held its breath, maintaining a deafening, paralyzing silence for 3 full, excruciating seconds after the chaotic footage finally ended. Breaking the unbearable tension, Coons spoke with devastating clarity. "Director, the FBI explicitly told this committee and the American public that your highly expensive trip to Milan was primarily for official business." He raised his hand again, pointing aggressively at the large screen, which was now paused on a highly unflattering still image from the footage. "What I just played for this room was recorded during that supposed official business trip." He locked eyes with the cornered director. "Is that what official business looks like?" Patel's mouth slowly opened, struggling physically to form words. When he finally spoke, his voice possessed a strained, desperate quality that it had absolutely not carried at any prior point during the previous 90 minutes of confident testimony. There was something fundamentally broken underneath his usually polished, aggressively professional surface. "Senator, I dutifully attended the Joint Operations Center and I met extensively with our Italian law enforcement partners, exactly as the FBI's official public statements have thoroughly described. The locker room visit was simply a brief, personal moment at the very end of the formal, official portion of the trip." Coons nodded slowly, just once, absorbing the excuse. "Brief," he repeated, letting the word hang in the air with dripping sarcasm. He then calmly opened a plain manila folder resting on his desk and deliberately removed a single, crisp document. "Director, according to these irrefutable records, the massive FBI jet departed from Washington Dulles Airport at exactly 7:42 a.m. on February 21st, and it did not return to Joint Base Andrews until 3:14 p.m. on February 24th. He held the stark white page high in the air for the cameras and the public to see. "That document is the official, unalterable travel log for the government aircraft. The Joint Operations Center visit that your team proudly posted about on social media took place on the very first day, February 21st. The gold medal hockey game was the following day, February 22nd. The infamous locker room visit occurred on the evening of February 22nd, local Milan time." He deliberately set the heavy page down on the desk with a soft, authoritative thud. "The jet did not return to the United States until February 24th. I must ask you, Director, what exactly was the urgent official purpose of your stay throughout the entire day of February 23rd and the entire morning of February 24th? Patel's jaw shifted visibly under the immense, crushing pressure. He stumbled slightly over his carefully prepared words. "Additional, highly sensitive meetings with our Italian law enforcement counterparts and critical American security personnel were fluidly scheduled across the entire duration of the multi-day trip." Coons looked at him silently for a long, agonizing moment, letting the weakness of the excuse hang exposed in the air. Then, without breaking devastating eye contact, he reached down and picked up a second, even more damning piece of paper. "Director, I have right here in my hand the FBI's own official, submitted calendar for your Milan visit, exactly as it was legally provided to this very committee." He held the schedule up to the glaring lights. "The Joint Operations Center visit is fully documented. Exactly one law enforcement coordination meeting on February 21st is properly documented. However, February 22nd clearly shows the gold medal hockey game listed in your official calendar as, and I am reading this verbatim directly from your own legally submitted calendar, quote, attending Olympic security observation, end quote." Coons set the flimsy calendar down with visible disgust. The days of February 23rd and 24th show absolutely no scheduled official events whatsoever. He paused, perfectly timing his delivery, allowing the gravity of the timeline to crush the witness. "So, let me ensure I understand this correctly. The official business that supposedly justified a luxurious round trip on a massive government aircraft to Italy, a lavish trip that ultimately cost the hardworking American taxpayer tens of thousands of dollars, officially concluded on February 21st. And yet, you purposely remained in Milan, enjoying the city through February 24th, for what your very own legally submitted calendar unequivocally shows as having absolutely no scheduled official events." Patel desperately tried to recover his rapidly collapsing narrative, falling back on intelligence jargon. "Senator, Highly classified operational security considerations mean that not every single sensitive meeting or covert engagement is carelessly entered into a standard, discoverable public calendar. But Senator Coons had prepared a devastating, inescapable final blow. He had one more document waiting in his arsenal. He slowly lifted it up, not even needing to read from it because he had memorized the horrific, undeniable facts. Director, while you were busy in Milan, enjoying yourself on the evening of February 22nd, the United States Secret Service was forced to shoot an armed, dangerous intruder who had successfully breached the inner security perimeter at Mar-a-Lago. He stared daggers at Patel. A dangerous man armed with a deadly weapon managed to get entirely past the critical outer security perimeter of the sitting president's private residence. You were the sworn director of the FBI, and you were drinking beer in Italy. He set the final document down, crossing his arms with utter contempt. Was the alleged operational security consideration that supposedly kept you lingering in Milan from February 23rd to the 24th related in any conceivable, logical way to the terrifying security incident at the president's residence on February 22nd? The resulting silence stretched on for an unbearable, agonizing 14 seconds. Patel's panicked attorney had nervously sat back down and then instinctively stood up yet again over the course of those painful, ticking seconds. The hearing room had descended into a specific, terrifying atmosphere of total, unwavering attention. Every single person breathing in that room was waiting anxiously for the answer to a trap question that had absolutely no clean, politically survivable exit. Patel finally spoke, his voice lacking any of its former authority. The FBI closely monitored the terrifying Mar-a-Lago incident in real time, and we seamlessly provided all necessary coordination and vital support from all of our global locations, including our assets in Italy. I was in constant, regular communication with our Washington headquarters throughout the entirety of the incident, and there was absolutely no pressing operational requirement for my physical, bodily presence within the continental United States at that time. Coons looked at him for a long moment with an expression of pure, unadulterated disbelief. Director, the brave whistleblower who testified under oath to this very committee just last week, explicitly stated that the FBI's critical evidence response team could not even secure a plane to quickly reach the chaotic scene of a horrific mass shooting at Brown University back in December. Why? Because your massive luxury jet was parked down in South Florida, and the only other available aircraft was strictly held back on your personal, direct instructions. He turned his gaze back to the large screen, which was still frozen on the humiliating, festive locker room footage. You previously described that catastrophic, deadly failure as adequate resource management. He looked back at Patel, his voice dripping with righteous, barely contained anger. Was it equally adequate resource management that the director of the FBI was partying in an Italian hockey locker room, loudly opening a beer can directly next to a presidential speakerphone, while a heavily armed intruder was actively attacking Mar-a-Lago? Patel had absolutely nothing left to offer. Every single available answer he could possibly give would only serve to make the catastrophic situation drastically worse. If he boldly claimed the Mar-a-Lago incident was easily handled, he was openly, on the record, confirming that he chose to remain vacationing in Milan anyway, even after a massive security breach at the president's personal residence. If he tried to claim the terrifying incident was actually minor, he would be publicly characterizing a direct Mar-a-Lago security event as somehow not being worth the great FBI director's personal attention. If he insisted he simply trusted his capable team to handle it back home, he was basically confirming that his official business justification for remaining in beautiful Italy through February 24th was not driven by vital operative security, but rather by his own selfish, indefensible personal preference to enjoy the post-Olympic festivities. Coons, sensing the complete collapse of his opponent, did not even bother to wait for the stammering, inevitable answer. He purposefully gathered his scattered papers together in the specific, highly choreographed way that veteran congressional questioners gather their documents when they know absolute certainty they have delivered the final, fatal blow and have secured the last word. Director, I want to formally note something of grave, historical importance for the permanent record. He looked down at Patel one final, dismissive time. On the date of February 22nd, 2026, while a dangerous armed man was actively breaching the critical security perimeter of the president's private residence, the sworn director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation was standing in a sweaty locker room in Milan, Italy, cracking open a cold beer right next to a phone, loudly playing the president's voice on speaker. That undeniable footage is now permanently entered into the congressional record. Coons then slowly stood up from his heavy leather chair. This is the incredibly rare, highly symbolic movement in a contentious hearing that decisively signals what comes next is a definitive, unanswerable statement and absolutely not another question. Your very own highly paid spokesperson publicly called this absurd trip official business. The very president you were enthusiastically calling on that speakerphone was reportedly furious and deeply unhappy about the beer and the optics. And now, this esteemed committee finally possesses the raw video footage, the damning travel log, the entirely empty submitted calendar, and the horrifying whistleblower account regarding the grounded Brown University plane. He turned his head slowly to look directly into the glowing red lights of the national broadcast cameras. The American people are more than smart enough to draw their own logical conclusions about what official business truly looks like. Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions. The hearing stubbornly continued on its scheduled path, and Patel desperately tried to recover his normal speaking cadence over the course of the next 30 grueling minutes. But the damage was permanent, terminal, and complete. The explosive footage was already spreading like wildfire everywhere across the globe long before the chairman's heavy wooden gavel finally fell to formally close the session. The sweaty locker room, the sharp metallic sound of the beer can cracking open while President Trump spoke, the excruciating 14 seconds of dead silence after the Mar-a-Lago ambush question, the contradictory travel log, the completely empty official calendar, it all magically added up to a staggering 60 million views online by the exact moment the session finally ended. And incredibly, there was absolutely no defensive statement issued from the scrambling, overwhelmed FBI spokesperson. Make sure to subscribe to this channel right now, because the official travelogue and the submitted empty calendar will officially enter the full, unrestricted public record within exactly 48 hours, and I promise you I'll be right here broadcasting live when they do. Please share this incredible video everywhere. He played the tape. It was only 41 seconds long. And the powerful FBI director, the very man who confidently told the United States Congress that his European vacation was strictly official business, had absolutely no coherent answer for what official business actually looks like when the president's very own voice is echoing on the speakerphone and a cold beer can is resting right there in your hand.